First one is that I did this week is a very, very simple, straightforward literature review on the impact of conflict and stress on the workplace, and just asked the very basic questions. What roles do conflict play in the workplace? What roles do stress play in the workplace? And then what are the positive coping mechanisms that people can use to deal with workplace conflict and work-related stress? And so this study was based actually out of a Russian context. So a lot of their, they did a lot of actually economic analysis on different, Russian time periods and how people reacted to stress and job loss and stuff like that during those periods. And they utilized research studies to essentially make this research review on workplace conflict, conflict management, work-related stress, and stress management. The results of this were that workplace conflict and work-related stress can have either positive or negative effects on employees. In terms of workplace conflict, in the short term, it can inspire greater innovation. And this actually makes me think of some of the other studies that I've read on the difference between looking at task conflict versus relationship conflict versus process conflict, and how sometimes task conflict in little amounts can be productive. The negative aspect of workplace conflict, which isn't a surprise to most of us, is that it leads to greater employee stress, increased absenteeism, greater turnover, reduced productivity, decreased performance, and less organizational profitability, which kind of shows the importance of conflict resolution training and things like that in order for people to cope with workplace conflict or deal with workplace conflict better. In terms of work-related stress, the positive outcomes or positive potential effects are short-term stress can produce greater productivity among employees. So if you're to set a deadline, just a little bit amount of stress to get some sort of task done, that can be really good and productive for employees. But the negative aspect of it, of long-term stress especially, is emotional and physical backlash. You have things like headaches, depression, anxiety that can come in there. In addition, in order to cope with the stress, people often incorporate negative coping mechanisms and turn to things like alcohol or being on the internet for too long or whatever to cope with that. And so this study suggests that as an alternative to negative coping mechanisms, positive coping mechanisms can be used to deal with work-related stress healthily. And they additionally said that keeping a positive attitude, recognizing there are some things you do not have control over, and being assertive instead of being aggressive or passive about your needs have also been helpful have been shown to be helpful in dealing with stress. So the key takeaway from this is that workplace conflict and work-related stress have the ability to be beneficial or harmful to employees and organizations. And so learning conflict resolution methods and incorporating positive coping mechanisms into your life can be helpful to mitigate the destructive potential workplace conflict and work-related stress can have in your life. And for consultants also, I think it's, incorporating stress-reducing activities could be into trainings and coaching and things like that could be very, very beneficial and very helpful for reducing stress and start making those or creating those positive coping mechanisms in client lives. So any thoughts, any discussion?
Just one more piece of literature that we could use to back up why we do what we do.
Yep.
It's a sales tool, but
from the work-related stress standpoint, there's that concept of eustress and how it's and it's implemented. You see the practice through stretch goals, but there is some question about how often to apply that and making sure that it's finite and putting definitions around it as to whether or not it could lead to some of these other negative coping mechanisms. From a coaching standpoint, regular challenge, just regular challenge, really pushing people into an area of discomfort. Never thought about it before, but it could be worthwhile to push them 1 week and then give them off a week, or push them, during one coaching session, next coaching session, maybe let them glide, maybe something a little less practice focused. But yeah, this is good. It backs up a lot of what I've seen too.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, and one thing I think is important about the stress part is there's that, and Terrell, you touched on it. There's that it's like a bell-shaped curve where it's like there's an optimal level of that stress that we need to like kind of push ourselves and be productive, and then at some point the demands start to feel overwhelming for the resources that we have, and then that's when unhealthy stress kind of erupts. So I think that's important to keep in mind. How do we help people find that optimal level of stress for each individual?
Yeah, I think it's very subjective, right? I mean, how I de-stress is going to be different than how Terrell de-stresses, or what might trigger one of us is not going to trigger another one of us.
Totally, yeah. It has to do with like threat perception, and each person's threat perception is different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like this is very, like, he's kind of like straightforward as far as the key takeaways and what the results show. I am definitely curious, like, how they measured it, as Jeremy said, and then also like just more specifics of what, learning conflict resolution methods and incorporating positive coping mechanisms into your life. Yeah, that can help, but how do they show that? What specific methods did they incorporate to prove that it would be useful, or did they not?
Well,
Oh,
go ahead, Ellis.
Was she done?
Were you gonna say something?
yeah.
Oh, my bad. I was just wondering how they measured conflict resolution or conflict period. Like, because I know conflict is one stressor, and I know the takeaway is like learning conflict resolution methods. But I know that there are other stressors in the workplace. Like if you're a woman in a male-dominated work environment, or you're a person of color in a white-dominated environment, I know that can add stress too. So do you know if there were other aspects of stress that were investigated besides just like, yeah, I just wanted to know like if anyone had any thoughts.
No, yeah. This was a pretty, for the most part, pretty brief review. And so, I think that it was more of a summary of the key points that they found in these studies. So nothing really specific about how, what kind of stress, what kind of workplace conflict, how do they measure that? It's more of just a overall summary of this is what these studies say and why we should take them into account in our lives, kind of a thing.
There's a growing literature on those different types of stressors and how they're measuring it, and how it's creating stress and in different outcomes. Yeah, there's definitely a growing literature in that area. I don't know exactly how they're measuring it, but there's different. I think there's different scales that they've built.